This is the first conference of this nature, and I'm happy to report that we have VIPs, VVIPs, and VVVIPs. So I do have a list here of persons that I would like to acknowledge specifically, and if I have not done that, please bear with me, because what it means is that you are a VVVVIP. Ms. Mazikwa, thank you very much. The Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe, represented by Mr. Richard Lupata. Thank you. The National Pharmaceutical Company, the Managing Director, Mrs. Flora Sifeku, my apologies. Hospital Chief Executive, Mr. Amos Masango. Mrs. Jackie Malmin. Thank you. Dr. Mary Zulu. Professional associations represented here. Mr. Dothan Moyo, Pharmaceutical Society of Zimbabwe. Mr. Elisha Mangwarara, Zimbabwe Dispensing Opticians Association. Mr. Richard Maveneka, Zimbabwe Optometric Association. Mr. Panganai Chilese, Zimbabwe Pharmacy Technicians Association. Mr. Posha Mwendera, Retail Pharmacists Association. Potiphar. Okay. Retail Pharmacists Association reminds me of the joke that I'm going to tell. But it was told by a white person. So with all white people, there will be a blonde somewhere in the story. So if there are white people, and if there are blonde white people who are here, who may be offended, please leave now. Okay, the story goes something like this. A pharmacist looked for a locum. The locum was white and blonde, and said, look after my pharmacy as I go. So the blonde is not supposed to be very clever, I'm told. So somebody came and they cough. So the blonde gave the patient a laxative. Just take it easy. So when the pharmacist returned after a few hours, the patient was leaning on the wall like this, and he was stiff as a log. So the pharmacist said, what happened? He says, oh, no. That guy came here, they cough, so I gave him a laxative. Laxative? Says, yes, but it's working. He's there, he's afraid to cough. So it's working. Ladies and gentlemen, on a serious note, let me welcome you to this inaugural Pharmacists Council annual conference. It's one that is held according to the plan every 5 years, and this is the first of its kind. The program is very packed. We apologize for the late start, but we hope to catch up as we go along. I am going to be the first one to cut my presentation in order to pay for the sins of starting late. So with those few remarks, I welcome you. Please enjoy the Victoria Falls. I know that the time will come for the proper things to be said, but let me thank the Secretariat for putting it together and all of you for coming. I thank you. I now call upon Ms. Ndemera, who will be chairing this session.
Call upon Mr. Mtizwa to give us a presentation, and he has promised that he's going to cut it in half. I hope it won't be 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, let me start by saying that I'm not a health professional. I'm a legal practitioner, and I'm disappointed that we started late because unlike you, you sell things that you can touch. you sell tablets, you sell hearing aids and things like that. For us, we sell time. So this is why we are very nervous about time. Mr. Chairman, interpreting the law is the topic that I was given, and I had also to cover professionalism. When I was given that topic, ladies and gentlemen, I celebrated because that topic is so wide, and I knew that I was not expected to cover everything. I did get some guidance from the Secretariat, and they said that I should look at section 124 and 125 of the Health Professions Act. But still, those are only two sections of a whole act, and they only deal with pharmacists and opticians. And yet this council, Mr. Chairman, regulates optometrists, and I know what that means. Orthopists, I have no idea what that means. Pharmacy technicians, dispensing opticians, and hearing aid specialists who are also called audiologists. So interpretation is the art of determining the intended meaning of a written document, such as a constitution, a statute, a contract, or a will. This process is fundamental in the practice and process of the law. But as you are health professionals, you do not require the full skill, but rather just a cursory appreciation of the subject. For lawyers and judges, however, this is their full-time job. There are various approaches, Mr. Chairman, relating to rules of construction. And in statutory and constitutional law, interpretation is often the subject of huge debates. This arises from the fact that words have a primary meaning as well as a secondary meaning. The starting point, ladies and gentlemen, with interpretation is to give words their ordinary meaning. It is only when there is ambiguity or absurdity that one uses the tools of interpretation. Now, because of the many fights around interpretation, the legislature frequently has put in definition sections in order to ensure that judges and lawyers do not become creative and end up changing what the legislature actually intended. Regrettably, this has only resulted in more and more interpretations. In Zimbabwe, we now even have an Interpretation Act, which, Mr. Chairman, is the first chapter in the statute book. Please take time to read it, but read it casually, please. You will find a number of interesting definitions there. But before we get there, if you can put the slide on the definitions. Right, there you are. In case you didn't know who you are, or you wanted to claim what you are not. African means any member of the Aboriginal tribes or races of Africa and adjacent islands, including Madagascar and Zanzibar. We stop there. Then it says, any person who has blood of such tribes or races and who lives as a member of an Aboriginal community. So suit yourself. Next slide, please. Now, this is what I call an example of careless drafting. Let's go through this together. Indigenous Zimbabwean means any person who, before 18 April 1980, was disadvantaged by unfair and discrimination on the grounds of his or her race, and any descendants of such person, and includes any company, association, syndicate, or partnership of which indigenous Zimbabweans form the majority of the members or hold controlling interest. Why I say careless drafting is because before 1980, there were no indigenous Zimbabweans. That's what that definition means. So we started on 18 April 1980. And for you to be an indigenous Zimbabwean, you don't have to be a Zimbabwean. You only need to be any person who was discriminated upon. So you can come from Honolulu or Inner Mongolia or Outer Mongolia, you qualify. And you can claim your stake. Okay, next slide. Right. Writing and expressions referring to writing shall be construed as including printing, typewriting, lithography, photography, and any other modes of representing or reproducing words or figures in a visible form. Next slide. Right. You have heard the fight where people say, chairperson, his or her car, this or that. Now you know, words importing the masculine gender includes females. That's the law. Next slide. Sign with reference to a person who is unable to write his name includes his mark. Okay? So, you cannot put any other sign unless you are not able to write. If you can write, you must sign properly. If you can't write, your mark is good enough. Next slide. Right, this is an interesting one for atheists and other religions. Christian name means any name prefixed to a surname, whether received at Christian baptism or not. So I have an uncle who's called Fambaoga. So I said to him, Uncle, is this your Christian name? He became violent. But you now know, okay? Right, next slide. Law means any enactment in the common law of Zimbabwe. Okay? So we could go on, okay? But you see, for our purposes, you can now put section 124 and 125. For our purposes, the main source of law which concerns us is the Health Professions Act, which not only creates the council, but also provides for the registration and conduct of health professionals. The Act also provides for the making of regulations in order to operationalize it. And it is therefore important for us all to be familiar with the Act as well as any regulations made in terms of the Act. We all know the cliche, Mr. Chairman, that everyone is presumed to know the law. We should go further and know where to find the law. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not necessary to commit the whole Act and the regulations to memory. All you need is to have a working knowledge of the Act and the regulations and to check what the Act provides for before putting the wrong foot in. It is not a shameful thing, certainly for lawyers, to say that I will check on this point and come back to you. But pharmacists, especially the blondes, are quick to give laxatives for coughs without checking. So there's nothing wrong with keeping a book and say, oh, you're sick, let's check, so that you are familiar with what you are doing. Now, turning to these two sections that are on the board there, or one can fit, the other one cannot fit. It must be read in conjunction with section 129 of the Act, which exempts a number of health professionals from the usual registration process, which we all are subject to. The people who are exempted includes doctors from outside who come in as consultants, health professionals from outside who are appointed by the council to conduct an examination in Zimbabwe, health professionals from outside who are on temporary duty with the military in Zimbabwe, and health professionals engaged for up to 4 months while teaching or conducting research in Zimbabwe. The two sections that I'm supposed to talk about are almost identical. I'm sure 124 has been read, 125. They are almost identical, except that the one relates to pharmacists and the other relates to dispensing opticians. It criminalizes anybody who, for gain, okay, pretends that they're a registered person. So when you are reading an act, you must truncate it so that you find where the mischief is. The mischief in this one is somebody doing it for gain. So if you are doing it for fun, there's no offense. The offense is only created when you do it for gain. Now, it then says anybody can do it, but if you are a body corporate or which is incorporated in terms of any law, the majority of directors are registered persons, etc., etc. You are all familiar with that section. The idea, ladies and gentlemen, is that pharmacists and dispensing opticians must operate within the law. There are professional aspects which relates to how they operate. So the first prize for them is to operate as individuals without mixing with non-professionals. Because when that happens, their professions or calling are compromised. And in order to avoid that, there are those rules which relate to corporate bodies, private companies and partnerships. The two sections express the legislature's fear that professionalism may be compromised. This is made clear by the insistence that the relevant professionals must in all cases maintain management and control. A sole pharmacist or optometrist presents no problem. There is the assumption that he or she, there I go again, is doing the right thing and that they are acting professionally. Regrettably, most professionals in this situation are found wanting. Very often, they are victims of commercial or economic pressure. They end up being manipulated and controlled, and the public's confidence is lost. These fears are not unfounded. In the case of companies, the papers that are submitted to council and to the registrar of companies will be showing compliance. The directors and shareholding will be showing the professionals in the majority. But in practice, this may be a sham. Professionalism is often thrown out of the window, and yet ethics and responsibility are expressions that should characterize professional practice. The advice, Mr. Chairman, which I offer is this. Make sure that you have sufficient resources and authority and influence within your organization to enable you to comply with your legal and professional responsibilities. Make sure that members of your board or partnership are aware of and understand your responsibility. Guard jealously and retain overall professional accountability and record keeping in case an issue arises later, and put in place standard operating procedures which are maintained and regularly reviewed. It is extremely important, Mr. Chairman, for members of the public to retain your confidence because the work that you do as health professionals are high technology activities, and decisions about medicines and healthcare are closely connected to private and public life. Responsible behavior can only be demonstrated when the moral basis, that is the values on which decisions are taken, is clear and is accepted by society as a whole. As with all ethical and moral issues, Mr. Chairman, the test should be this. After doing what I have done, will I sleep well? If you find that you are not sleeping well, that is an opportunity to introspect and stop it. Because, Mr. Chairman, initially, when we all do wrong things at first, we feel pain. We toss and turn and agonize. But just as with a knife, when it cuts for the first time, it surely must feel some pain. but it then gets blunted with use. The next decision and subsequent ones which follow are much easier to make, notwithstanding the fact that they remain unethical. Mr. Chairman, I think that for us to remain professional, we need to stay close to our peers. Locally, let us belong to professional bodies. The Pharmacists' Council is not a professional body, it's a regulatory body. Let us appreciate that difference. Let us have contact with international peers so that we learn what they are doing. The last slide, Mr. Magaya. Yes. A child who has not traveled thinks that his mother is the best cook in the whole world. This is an old African proverb. So unless you interact with others, you look outside the window of your own room, you look outside Zimbabwe, you will not be a good person. Let us thirst for knowledge. If we do, this whole fight over CD points will be a thing of the past. Let us aim for the day where we demand an upward revision of the number of CPD points. The last slide, Mr. Magaya. I thank you.
Next, it's time to break into our commissions.
This particular session is an assignment from the chairman of the Pharmacists' Council himself. Because what we are going to cover is going by his recommendation, because he came up with a list of issues that we are supposed to cover, but in our pre-discussion, we are expected to come up with a resolution as this group. So by the end of this session, we should make resolution on about 6 issues.
Morning. Probably I would start by acknowledging our Pharmacist Council Chair and other officials from PCSET and also from DPS and the rest of the Ministry of Health and Child Welfare and Child Care. I would also want to acknowledge my pre-reg supervisor, Dr. Jimbo. And last but not least, I would want to acknowledge my wife who is here. Because she is there, I will try to finish my statements. She always say, you don't finish your statements when you present. Because she's here, I will try to finish them. So my presentation is specialization through training or education. I actually like that title, Humble African. I think from what Mr. Mtiswa said, I think everyone can be an African, but not everyone will be humble. Just to start, I acknowledge that there are several professionals, but I would use farmers because I'm more familiar with farmers as my classical example, hoping that all professionals would then drive parallels and everything such that they would possibly adopt similar proposals in their various professionals. As a start, we would see that, well, that's natural selection. Only those that can adapt will see the future. Otherwise, if you fail to adapt, if any profession fails to adapt, it will both cease to be relevant to its consumers and to itself. So, my presentation, I will try to make it in this order, where I try to trace history from the biblical times. Again, remember, I'm using pharmacies as a classical example. then try to look on the various developments and the bridge that I am suggesting, which is specialization through training.